who are the major players? What are the factions that they represent, and kind of maybe the history of how the Middle East was divided up uh, over time.
All right. So I'll go back 100 years ago since we're a history of money podcast as well as what we try to focus on. But tied to that is empire governance and control, right? And so I think to understand what's going on literally this week with the ceasefire in Iran, the big news headline coming out on Tuesday, April 7th, you got to go back and just understand where the starting point was in terms of what was established and laid down in place, and that thing is kind of what's going through its evolution and reordering as we speak. This reordering, I'll get into it maybe in a little more detail on a later podcast, but I think of this as being basically in process since really the global financial crisis of 2008, or even you could say the attacks of September 11th really precipitated this process in motion with the U.S. and it was a broader coalition going in. I think the U.K., Poland, et cetera, were involved, but turnover in Iraq, getting rid of the Saddam Hussein regime, then the actions in Afghanistan. But really, with 2008, after that, we saw the Arab Spring. Uh, a decade plus now of conflict in Syria. Uh, it's everywhere across this entire region, essentially. Everything north of the GCC countries, what we call, I guess, if you just want to find a name for this stretch of land, the Fertile Crescent, right? The old Fertile
Mesopotamia.
Crescent that we
Yeah.
all, yeah, that we all learned about in our grade school social studies classes as like the cradle of civilization as we know it today. Um, and so just to, we don't want to go over the history of the entire world, right? Um,
Please.
but what what we're looking at right here with the US Iran, I think, is like the next step in this biggest of reshufflings that is taking place since World War One. And if we just want to do the TLDR summary of World War One, I think we overly focus on what the war was and meant from the standpoint of just being a complete meat grinder. So many young men lost their lives for what appeared to be no apparent reason, and we focus on like the battle line on the Western Front between France, Germany, all those Northern European nations who lost a generation of its young men. But really, what I think about World War One as representing was um, think about the outputs, what happened afterward, the net effect, where the rubber meets the road, was you had the land empires all collapse. So um, German Empire or the Prussian Empire, Austro-Hungarian, Russian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire were all zeroed out. And I'll argue that was itself the purpose of World War One, right? We can go through like Peter Frankopan's The Silk Road actually presents this, so I'm not um, taking this swim lane all by myself. And he's a like a UK centric historian, right? Has all his knights, family titles, all of that. He specifically goes in and calls out World War One happened because Russia was encroaching just from the growth of its own empire. It was going to start uh, expanding its territorial influence and sphere into this neck of the Middle East that is Persia, which we've talked about in recent weeks, represents like a key nexus between the old world's Silk Road trade routes, but also the new paradigm, right? The European trade franchise that's been built out on maritime sea routes and you know trade with ships on water as opposed to like literally caravans of camels,
Walking
moving
across. Yeah.
goods, walking across roads. Iran, or what the British call Persia, is really the key nexus for both of those two things because of its proximity over the key choke point that we're all hearing about right now with Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz, etc. But you look back at the map, we don't need to go into this, but effectively, what you got was an expansion of British interests as the in this region, the Ottoman and Russian empires collapsed and went into retreat. So this kind of new order that was being established, like post 1918. That's, in my opinion, what we've been living through, like a reordering of that structure put in place 100 years ago, really with September 11th, kickstarting those events. And sometimes the titles or the explanatory, I guess, smoking guns are right under your nose. But like, what was 9/11? It was attack on literally the World Trade Center. This is something that centers around the business of trade and an upheaval in that kind of base layer of the global economy is literally what we're living through in real time. And that just tells me this process is unfolding and we're getting into a point where something that was unstable before, this old structure that we have up here on the map that was laid out in World War One, and then kind of cemented and locked in with World War Two. And we've been living under that order for basically 70 years, the entire lifetime of essentially everybody who is active in the economy today has grown up swimming in this water. All of that is very quickly changing, I think, under our eyes. So we'll get into the macro charts. Now, what I want to talk about here, what I'm going to use to illustrate this is the ceasefire this week. As I was processing this Tuesday, right, what does this represent? Well, it means the military action has worked well enough, despite all the just the groping going on social media, everybody claiming, the U.S. is losing this thing, what have you. The way I read this, the U.S. action was competent and decisive enough to force a counterparty to the table. And now U.S., which is, when I say the U.S., don't treat anything as a monolith, right? These countries, that's too simple of a model. The 47th administration representing its power faction on behalf of the U.S. has come down and agreed to come sit at the table with a counterparty who may or may not be like the ruling party or have governance authority over the entire territory of Iran itself. My point is, though, they've gotten somebody or someone to come to the table. And so this 2-week window, this 14-day ceasefire, or let's call it, we were thinking about titling this episode 2 weeks to steal the nerve, kind of a play on, COVID, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. We might not do that just because we don't want to get what's the word, Cameron, blacklisted,
Deboosted,
suppressed.
yeah. Well, I also think it's, not clear enough if you just see the title alone. But yeah, to your point, though, I think it's related to exactly what's going on, right?
Yep. So there's a 2-week window for this faction from the U.S. and a faction from the Iranian side to establish a beachhead, come to what I think is going to be, this will not be the ultimate conclusion of the Iran, like just settling the Iran arena of this bigger picture we talked about, like with the regional upheaval that's in place. But this 2-week period, I think, is key for progressing this transition into the next step. Now, when I say that, this 2-week window is like an extremely perilous time because if you think about the incumbent players who were benefiting off of this structure, they have everything to lose. So we'll just start with people like, let's say, IRGC leaders, even Mojtaba Khomeini, the new supreme leader of call it the Islamic Republic of Iran. We know that he has, his wealth tied up in, let's say, European, London, financial centers, that whole complex, right? That was really locked in for this region with that transition that happened at World War One. We've shown, the receipts here. They've identified multiple properties around, London's Billionaires Rows, all of that. So they have all of their wealth tied up with a different stakeholder than what's at place with these U.S.-Iran negotiations right now that are taking place during the ceasefire. So my point here, you have a lot of interest who want to sabotage this process, right? So we're looking at like an extremely up in the air 2 week window for some progress to be made. This is the key step here. The dropping bombs, taking out attacks, or taking out, an entire org chart, all of that. That just shows your military competence. Now to actually um, make that effort all worthwhile, you've got to lock in something here if you're the stakeholders looking to make this
Right.
this big transition. It has to happen either way, right? We
Something will
know this
happen. Yeah.
region, the existing structures are unstable. What is unstable is not it's by definition perishable, right? So this is like something in your pantry food. It's not edible anymore. Like it's past its shelf life date. So we have to do something has to take place. All right. So what I was thinking Tuesday evening as I'm just kind of processing events, what I think might take place over this next 14-day window, which we burned off 2 more days now. It's 12-day window now. Um, I thought about how many times we've been in the process of like a ceasefire announced, right? Over the last 3 to 4 years, as this regional conflict has really picked up and accelerated, I would say with the Russian incursion into Ukraine, on kind of a if you trace the line of the map of all the way up to Europe and the Baltics from the Middle East, you start to see like, oh, this is just Iron Curtain type of stuff. They're still fighting over those same borderlands that they all and the commodity production that's tied in them that they've been fighting over for centuries, if not millennia. All right, so you go through. Maybe we'll title this episode "Ceasefire Fatigue." I've cataloged all of the ceasefire kind of windows that we've seen to tie up the other flare-ups that we've seen in this regional realignment as this process takes shape. So, number one, we've got three of them on the Israel-Hamas situation over Gaza. And then there's also been one over Israel and Lebanon with Hezbollah. You had a failed attempt with Ukraine in 2025, right? That never was able to meet between the bid and ask of what Ukraine wanted out of its bulleted list of points, or Russia wanted out of its bulleted list of points. So there was never any meeting in the middle where any side or both sides could agree to a ceasefire on that open front. Now we've got one in Iran. My point here, like markets, we're thinking about right now what to do over this, how we want to react. My take here, if you're the U.S. side, or what we call the faction of the U.S. that's represented by the 47th administration, you really just want to take some ground. You don't have to solve the whole thing here. You just have to move the ball forward. What does that mean? Give Iran some of the things that they want. Like they want to be removed from sanctions. Like we look at this number 7. It's like, okay, if that's your ask, well, we can meet you with the bid of, hey, some parties who we view as representing the interest of the civilian government of Iran. That could be wealthy families. It could be financial institutions or banks. It could be, part of the civilian military Artesh, et cetera. But just whoever those people are, those individuals or businesses might come off of sanctions and be allowed to do business with ultimately what amounts to the U.S. Treasury as a counterparty, right? Are they allowed to receive dollar proceeds from the base asset, right, which is levered USTs, is kind of how the existing dollar financial system works. It's turtles all the way down. But I think that's the tell you're looking for here is who makes it out of this process on the whitelist for the OFAC sanctions of who's allowed to do business in Iran, because it is not going to be, in my opinion, a just blanket whitelisting of all parties, fair game, everybody go do business in Iran. That is not happening, right?
Yeah.
So if you're part of the adverse faction who's on the other side of this, who wants to see the status quo maintained, those people are not going to make it through this whitelisting process. All right. Number 8 is release of Iranian funds frozen and frozen assets held by the U.S. What does that mean? Just opening up the those same institutions to basically play inside of the dollar financial system, right? If you think about this, this was part of the process for the JCPOA deal back in 2014, 2015 that Obama agreed to with the countries we call now the E3, UK, France, Germany. So it will not be the same thing as an agreement between U.S. with the E3 with the existing government of Iran. I think that with the U.S. leading from behind in Obama's terms, look for this to be something more just U.S. only, Iran only, but you may get other friendly
Small
counterparties in
coalition.
the region. GCC, who knows? China might even end up being privy to this. Who knows how this shakes out? But I expect it to be a specific leadership faction within Iran that the U.S. Estimates that it can do business with. When I say the U.S., I mean, obviously speaking, not just the U.S. as a monolith, the 47th administration, its financial institutions who back it, all of that.
Right.
So I think that's what we're looking for. But now I want to go into um, you see this process taking place, and you're already seeing the saboteurs kind of try to spike this deal. And really, all they are trying to do is flood the zone, right? Just inject enough chaos into the process, leak memos from Five Eyes. Hey, you can't trust the IRGC to uphold the ceasefire. Oh, Israel, some IRGC agent says the ceasefire has already been violated because Iran has not stopped attacking Lebanon, et cetera. They're just trying to muddy the water, in my perspective, to prevent this key step, this beachhead, from being reached. Right. So that's what we're watching here in the headlines. This 2 week period, expect it to be very muddy. Things are going to be up in the air in the headlines. But I think on the net, what you want to use to get your bearings here, use use markets as your ultimate signal. The bigger, the better, right? The more liquid, broadly held, et cetera.